Hey guys, I usually like to take Sundays off, but I didn't make a video for a couple days now, so I figured I would jump in and talk about something rather uncomfortable. And uncomfortable because, well, things are pretty bad right now, and we're seeing the. Let me find. I'm gonna start on my notes here. We're seeing the fruits of it in action. There's been some breaking news. This thing with Hunter Biden's laptop. Before I said I don't know if it's real. Well, it's real. It actually is real. It wasn't just the New York Post coming out. It had been sent to multiple places. Tucker Carlson's got a copy of it. More stuff's being released. Basically, they released a trickle of information, and then they said, oh, well, he didn't, they said things like, oh, well, Hunter Biden did crack. Who cares, right? And they ignored the corruption stuff. And then they said, oh, Joe Biden never took the meeting with the Ukrainians. He just was offered. And then, of course, the next day they released emails that say, of the Ukrainians thanking them for introducing him to to introducing them to the former vice president. Well, while he was vice president, so it was the vice president. And then they were saying, oh, okay, well that's just the Ukraine, and then they were showing the China stuff, and they're like, oh well, there was no quid pro quo with China, the $4.5 billion, that was all, and they haven't really explained that. But then they went and they found the White House logs, and yes, indeed, the Chinese did go in for the scheduled meeting. The level of corruption is, I've never seen anything this bad. Um, this is one of the scariest stories. This is probably the scariest story of my lifetime, and this is really bad. We're talking, the entirety of the Democratic Party is trying to put this guy in office. I mean, forget the dementia. He's completely 100% compromised by the Chinese, and it's not a matter of him. It's not a matter of him just being a selfish prick and using his influence to make money. It's a matter of the fact that the Chinese essentially have blackmail on him through his son. I mean, if that would be like the Chinese having like pictures of Hunter Biden. I'm not Hunter Biden. Oh my God. Pictures of like one of Bush's daughters or Donald Trump Jr. like doing lines, and there's underage people involved. This is some of the Epstein stuff, and this is also has to do with essentially the human trafficking that has been popping out of Asia and also through Mexico and stuff. So it's not really a surprise that a lot of those pieces are falling together. And I've been monitoring some Japanese media a little bit. I mean, I don't speak Japanese, but occasionally you get people who talk about it online and the kind of stories they're focusing on. And they pretty much exploded in interest when a little story that popped up. In fact, I don't even remember if I talked about it, but it was in New York City. Basically, a U.S. Army Reserve / NYPD guy was arrested for being a CCP spy, spying on the Tibetans. And remember, at the time I said, and again, I don't remember if I did a video on it, but at the time, people I was talking to about it, I said, why are they spying on the Tibetans? I mean, I know they don't like the Tibetans, but why are they spying on the U.S. Tibetans? And then, of course, the story breaks not too much longer after that basically they've rounded up, they've rounded up 500,000 of them and putting them in concentration camps. And it looks like they're going to systemically exterminate, or at the very least completely dilute them, because they're re-educating them. So they're either going to work them to death or completely brainwash them. And Tibet is it's basically phase 2. They did it to the Uyghurs, and now they're doing it to the Tibetans because it was so effective for the Uyghurs. I mean, they weren't stopped. They weren't held to taken to task. They weren't really sanctioned. They just got criticized. So that was why I believe that the particularly Taiwan and Japan medias were looking at it. Taiwan, obviously, they get it in Chinese, so you get things translated. But the Japanese are really worried about the Chinese, and they're friends with Taiwan, so they were talking back and forth. And in the U.S., this was just another tiny story that flew under the radar. But it looks like it looks like essentially a lot of these stories are all coming together. Everything from the human trafficking to the CCP camps to the basically the money laundering to the Ukraine stuff. I mean, something interesting was one of the people. Basically, there's been two people who were arrested essentially for the Ukraine corruption deal that are really important. They essentially were the fall guys for Hunter Biden, Joe Biden. One of them was Hunter Biden's previous business partner, who is now flipped, and now he's releasing his own data and his own computer data and his own text messages, which are all kinds of different exchanges and data and whatnot with Hunter Biden, about Hunter Biden with other members of the Biden family and the Chinese. Like it's unbelievable the amount of stuff that's getting released. It's actually overwhelming to actually even try to process what's going on here. And then the other guy is essentially a Chinese billionaire who was basically doing the CCP's bidding, roping him into this. And then when he went back to China, they arrested him. Basically, they were tying up the loose ends. God knows what happened to that guy. And there's something I'm going to talk about that is a Chinese counterintelligence strategy, or I should say it's more of the Chinese strategic strategy they developed pretty much after they got into the WHO. They basically said, how are we going to... We're probably not going to be able to beat the Americans militarily, or I should say, if we just leave them be. So we have to subvert them, and we got to do it faster than the Soviets subverted them, because the Soviets' policy, while it caused unrest, the Soviets ultimately lost. The Chinese are much, much more aggressive, and this is their... I'm going to explain to you their policy. And you're just going to kind of start, probably your head's going to start rolling, and you're going to understand essentially how this stuff fits in. I probably won't even need to tell you. They have a thing they call the blue, gold, yellow. And what that is essentially a three-phase, I don't want to say takeover, but a three-phase positioning to essentially put themselves in the strongest hand they can have possible internationally. It's focused on the U.S. It is used in other places, other countries. That this is the strategy that Chinese have used. The first thing is basically the Chinese should use their money, because remember, they just print money, and they use their investors, and they basically incentivize them to purchase U.S. media, mainstream media, internet, websites and stuff like that. I mean, they've got a stake in Reddit. Like, I'm not even kidding. They make a lot of those purchases and essentially control the mouthpiece. China knows if you control the information, everything else down the line is secondary. But if you control the information, that is the first step to essentially being able to enact other plans, because then the things you do as you screw up along the way get covered up. The second is basically, if you can't straight up buy, even if you can't straight up buy a company, provide the basically financial incentives to get companies tied to you. A good example of this would be like what Tencent Holdings has done, and what the CCP essentially has done for Disney, right? They offer Disney an unbelievable load of money that they can't turn down, and then they go film something like Mulan. They offer a university a ridiculous amount of money, and then all of a sudden now you've got professors coming out, saying, basically saying, oh, well, it couldn't have been a Chinese-developed virus. And you realize, because basically, if you have the money there, if there's that much money on the table, you don't really need to actually do that much arm twisting to get what you want, because they're looking at the money. They're going to naturally not want to piss off the people who are basically sending the money. Mulan was not profitable for Disney. But the reason why Disney hasn't gone bankrupt for the disaster that Mulan is because there's basically Chinese investment money involved. And if Disney doesn't want to go bankrupt in the future, they can't be crapping on China. They're dependent on China for particularly a lot of their films to even make back the money they're trying. Why would they, after the entire Star Wars series flopped, despite them, downplaying John Boyega and stuff and doing everything they could, that still flopped for Chinese audiences? Why would they continue to work with the Chinese in China, particularly? They obviously don't make stuff that the Chinese like, right? Well, the Chinese were throwing money at them. throwing so much money at them that they turned a blind eye to the fact that they were recording basically 5 miles away from Uyghur concentration camps where they were harvesting organs. I mean, Disney has no soul, but could you imagine the amount of money that you would have to do to allow basically a large Disney operation for nobody to come out and start blowing the whistle, and just to sell your soul for that? Like, because what they do is they provide so much money that somebody can say, like, well, the lesser of two evils is, like, okay, we can't do anything about the genocide, but we can stop Disney from going bankrupt. So then they choose what they think is like the other option, right? And that's just inherent corruption when there's that much money at stake. And this is not the only company that they do this with. They do this with lots of companies. They tried to do this with the farmers too, where they basically said, we're going to essentially sanction all your stuff so that basically the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt and the Farm Belt of the United States all pretty much were getting slammed, and they did. Trump got hurt in the 2018 election, but that was a lot because the Chinese basically said, we own a certain amount of stuff and we guarantee purchase a certain amount of stuff, and now we're going to pull that money off the table, right? They buy, a certain X number of soybeans from the U.S. and they keep buying more and more and more. And it's like, oh, okay, they're importing, right? And then China basically gets to say, no, we just stop. We just stop doing that. And then all of a sudden now a whole entire group of voters in a red state, ironically, suddenly are feeling the heat. They're losing their jobs. And it's basically they're buying influence, because it doesn't matter. They don't have to go tell the farmers, hey, this is the president that the Chinese don't happen to like. This is Trump's fault. All they have to do is literally just pull the purchasing and pull the money, and people who are political opportunists are going to jump in and say, we want Trump out, we want the Republicans to lose or whatever. So what if that was also the Chinese goal? They still think that that's it's because it's their team, right? And they would do the same thing if they thought for some reason basically they needed to lean on a Democrat. So don't think this is necessarily one-sided completely. This is the strategy, and it's you put such a big carrot out there for these companies that it is devastating to pull it away. And whether it's a company, whether it's a university, whether it's a media outlet, particularly film, entertainment, that kind of stuff, and it's terrifying. Okay, all right. Well, you think, okay, well, money's one thing, but the government could technically step in and say, no, you have to sell these things back. You have to do this. You have to do that. Step in, basically wave a really hefty hand to basically cut down these PLA, CCP, and independent resources, right? But that's not what they do, because they have the yellow phase. So I explained blue, which is basically by the means of communication. I explained the gold, which is essentially basically create the biggest carrots possible so that you can cause damage and also get people to get basically these companies and these large interest groups to naturally favor not pissing you off or doing your bidding just because you're literally just holding billions of dollars. And they, like the universities, like I said. Yellow is where they basically use honey traps and stuff like that to compromise specific targeted individuals, right? They try to do this to everyone. They're bringing the people in. They say, oh yeah, bring Biden, bring your son, right? Who's a drug addict, right? Bring him to China, and we know they're not unaware of essentially the Ukrainian stuff because they were tied into that. They bring him into China multiple times, and what do? Well, they tie him in with the money, and he's taking the money. Well, now he doesn't want to be hard on China because then people will point at him and say, oh, because now the Chinese essentially have blackmail. Basically, they offered him a certain amount of money. He took it. He basically got $4.5 billion in assets, right? And, it just works out good for him. But that's not all that they do. So not only do they have the financial documents that they blackmail with, they also have photos. They, prostitutes. I mean, the dude was on meth and stuff. It's really not that hard to influence that stuff. And now they're talking basically underage. Literally, how Epstein had his whole business where he would basically have the people go to the island and then he would record them. And then that was how he held his leverage, right? He stopped getting his money from his investments. I mean, he embezzled his money to start, but then he somehow still kept making money after the fact. Wasn't sure how that was going on. Got tied in with the Clintons, Clinton Foundation, that kind of stuff. There was a lot going on with him. And it really makes me wonder, because the Chinese explicitly state that this is their strategy. And you see somebody like Epstein doing that. Was he leveraging that against the Chinese? Or was he actually basically a Chinese contractor? Where did Maxwell get her millions of dollars in cash to buy her, I think it was like a New York home or whatever. She came back, and basically the FBI tricked her into coming back, and then she literally bought a house in, I think it was New York. It was either New York State or New Jersey. I can't remember. In cash, for like whatever millions of dollars. How does that happen? Where's that? That money's not reported on the. It's we know there's tax issues going on here too, right? I mean, yeah, he went down to the Caymans and stuff too, but that kind of cash doesn't just move. That doesn't just materialize. You don't just show up when all the assets and all of Epstein's places are completely guarded by, the FBI and NYPD and all the places, like they're actually crime scenes, and then show up and then just find like $1 million buried in a suitcase you left somewhere, and then you don't spend it all. You actually just disappear, right? Something is really, really strange with all this. I mean, we know Epstein was murdered. We know that. That's not really speculation. We know there's just way too many coincidences. It's pretty obvious the guy was murdered, and we don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know how that's tied in, but I'm just saying it's the same kind of like, I get the same sense of like seeing this where it's like, okay, the pieces are there. They're not all lining up, but the more we learn, the more you think, okay, who's in play here? Now we're seeing the stuff with Hunter Biden, and we're seeing that not on his laptop he had some of this stuff was incriminating, but also the Chinese had it. Now, there's a whistleblower who's a partner of Dr. Li Min Yang. I forget his name. I think it's Gao. He was basically one of the guys who helped her get out. Now, he's basically on the CCP shit list. They don't want him. But he's been in Taiwan basically doing his PR there, while Li Ming is... is it Li Ming? Yeah, Li Ming has been in the United States basically networking with research scientists to try to basically show what's going on. Now, apparently there's been some hard drives turned over to the Department of Justice. What's on these hard drives are basically the incriminating evidence, all this stuff that has to do with the financial dealings of Hunter Biden. But also is apparently CCP data on the corona stuff. He's 100% convinced as well, and I'm seeing more and more people. The foreigners, like the Japanese, believe this was a bioweapon. We're the only media group that's not entertaining this. And I had mentioned that before, like I did a whole video on bioweapons, why you use them, why you don't. I said, doesn't that stuff sound familiar? Well, here's the thing. We might be ignoring it in the United States, too busy, pissing on each other because of this election. The rest of basically Asia and essentially China's enemies are not ignoring this. They are worried, and they think that it's a bioweapon, and Chinese whistleblowers keep coming out one after another saying it was a bioweapon. And it makes sense. I mean, it is the perfect bioweapon because it's high spread, low death. It's enough to shut down an economy and cause absolute disruption, right? And if you're the CCP and you essentially have blackmail on, involving Hunter Biden, but you essentially have blackmail of financial stuff and child abuse and all this stuff on the son of someone who could be the next president of the United States, you're going to pull out all the stops to make sure that your guy, the guy you have leverage on, is in, right? I mean, that's what these Chinese whistleblowers are saying. And the thing is that whether there's these second hard drives or not, which I tend to believe they probably do exist because basically the facts are lining up to way too closely. There's still, from basically the stuff that Biden's ex-partner is releasing and from this stuff that is on Biden's laptop, they're still finding the CCP involvement and the talks about the cash and the basically pay to play and the influences and the basically selling meetings essentially to be friendly to the Chinese. And that's not the only thing that's been going on. So I'm explaining those phases to you. And here's the thing. This all happened very rapidly over the last, really the last 10 years, 10, 12 years, pretty much over the course of the Obama administration. A lot of this stuff had occurred. I'm going to list off some purchases that are going to, again, the U.S. government had to sign off on these, which means basically the Obama administration had to be, or basically the administration in charge had to be paid off to get a lot of these. General Electric. I didn't know this. I missed this. Do you remember Jeffrey Immelt, one of Obama's top advisors, as essentially General Electric's stock kept dropping and dropping and dropping, and they were disenfranchising their stockholders to sell out. And he was still one of Obama's top advisors. In 2016, I remember, Trump 2016, but he was elected in November 2016, so he didn't take office until 2017. In 2016, General Electric was sold to basically Harrier, H-A-I-E-R, Harrier. That's a Chinese electronics giant. You've probably seen some of their products, but you probably don't see it anymore. You probably all see it labeled General Electric. General Electric that's one of the largest U.S. companies in history, and basically, under the Obama administration with Jeff Immelt, they dove the stock price down so low that by 2016, General Electric was purchased by the Chinese. That's weird. And I wasn't even aware that level of purchase had happened. I know the Chinese had wanted General Electric to build trains in China, and then there was this whole controversy about that. I didn't realize that the way they dealt with that was literally just to buy it out at the end of 2016. I didn't realize that had even occurred. That's terrifying. General Electric makes no wonder all of a sudden the aerospace shit has been jumping up with China. One of China's biggest aerospace problems is that they've always made underpowered engines. Whatever they make, it doesn't put out enough power. That has been a routine problem again and again and again and again. Remember the PR blitz General Electric had for last couple years of the Obama administration, first 2 years of Trump administration? You turn on the TV, and it's a freaking weird General Electric commercial. It's like, who's buying General Electric? It just was a big PR thing, right? The engines that General Electric make, that's the stuff that's basically subcontracted out to Boeing, and the engines General Electric make are actually world class. That was one of the reasons why it was so confusing how poorly the company was being running. It's a part of basically the military-industrial complex. But essentially, they make engines, and they make a lot of it for the military, Honeywell being one of the main competitors. China now, all of a sudden, they're opening up their airlines. They're doing... And I'm like, how are they getting the technology to do this? And you think, okay, maybe they researched it on their own and they caught up. Not if they bought General Electric in 2016. That means they pretty much got the engines. They got the engines they need. Okay, that one freaks me out a little bit. Media, AMC Theaters. Dalian Wanda Group. They bought AMC Theaters in 2012. They bought Carmike Cinemas around that same time. AMC is one of the largest, basically, cinema chains in the United States. You notice how AMC is being propped up, but Regal's basically looking like they're going to shut down? Yeah, AMC's owned by the Chinese, so they can decide whether they want it to go bankrupt or not, but that's also a national security interest to them to essentially control the cinema. This is something the Soviets only could have dreamed of. They also bought Legendary Films. And you've seen Legendary. Everybody's seen Legendary's films. Jurassic World, Pacific Rim, Godzilla, the Warcraft movie. There's a whole list. That's outright owned by the Chinese. I didn't realize that. I knew that there was Chinese money invested. But those are outright owned by the Chinese, so it's not really a mistake that, Godzilla and Pacific Rim and stuff made the Chinese look great. Pacific Rim, like, Chinese got their own robot and stuff, and they were the good guys. That's, again, like, that's like the Soviet Union owning a major Hollywood studio. Like what's going on here? That's all Chinese money. I mean, we laugh because Jurassic World and the what the hell was the sequel? Like all that stuff. It was all pretty crappy. And it's like, oh, did it really make money in the cinema? I don't know. Why are they making these? Why are these vapid, mindless things that usually pander to whatever? Why is this happening in Hollywood? And that they're straight up owned by the Chinese. I hadn't even realized that. Here's one. Smithfield Foods. Smithfield Foods is the largest pork exporter and pork producer in the world. Smithfield Foods is based in Virginia. The Chinese purchased them in 2013. China is one of the largest consumers of pork. That's largely because, for example, Israel is the largest consumer of turkey. I should say the largest wheat exporter to Turkey. The largest exporter we have for pork is China. Do you remember how when the trade negotiations first occurred, Chinese, they said, oh yeah, we'll buy X amount of pork from the United States. They were just moving money from the right hand to the left hand, and that's why those deals were basically rejected. That's why all this Chinese trade stuff is on hold. And the only thing that the Trump administration's made them buy is essentially certain like farm goods like soybeans and things like that they had already promised to buy, but that they didn't have a stake in. Why are they still buying the pork? Well, they're still buying the pork because we barely benefit from it, and they literally own the company that's making the money from sending the pork out. I mean, China owns U.S. food, right? Okay, that's scary. Annabang Insurance Group. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The Waldorf Astoria, it's like a big Manhattan hotel that I forget when they bought that. But then they started buying other groups. So they also bought Fidelity and Guarantee Life Insurance. I believe those are both New York-based insurance companies. Okay, so remember the commercials when you see Fidelity, just remember that's owned by the Chinese. But they also bought Blackstone Group's luxury group, Essex Hotels, Ritz-Carlton in California. I'm not sure if it's I don't know how Ritz-Carlton's structured. I think it might just be Ritz in California. I don't think it's the whole Ritz-Carlton network, but still, that's significant. Four Seasons in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Fairmount, Fairmount Scottsdale in Arizona, like major luxury hotels. And we all know what the Chinese love to do with their hotels. They bug the shit out of them. These are places you will not stay if you were a U.S. government employee for the reasons of basically these things being owned by the Chinese. That's scary. That means that the CCP can move their spies in, move their military assets in, all these different places and basically hide them in luxury hotels. It's Chinese owned. And here's the really freaky thing, right? Before, some people like to argue, they say, oh, well, yeah, but it's Chinese businesses that own these things. It's not like the government owns this. Well, the CCP PLA in 2018, they nationalized the Amc Insurance Group. They just took them over. They control them directly. I guess they just didn't like how it was being run, but China just did that. And now, do you think the CCP and PLA would have been able to purchase all these gigantic hotels under the Trump administration, or under even under the Obama administration, if they started buying this stuff in I guess 2013 is when they started their massive buy-ups? It would have been more. It basically, if it had been the Chinese government, it probably might have made front page news. But because it was a Chinese investor or a Chinese company, then it wasn't as looked at as big of a deal. But now the CCP just moved in; they just nationalized it. That's why we can't be selling shit to these countries that have governments like that. It's same way in Venezuela. Like they just we're socialists now. We nationalize. Okay. Let's see. It's continued. Where's the one? Let's keep going. Tailordale Continental Motors and Mattuck Services, Chinese State-Owned Aviation Industry Corporation, AVIC. American aircraft manufacturer, now owned by the Beijing AVIC, is ranked 150. So again, remember I said excuse me, aircraft engines. That was a big problem the Chinese had with Chinese military, particularly why their helicopter fleet is really kind of not something to be. It's really not that great, and it has a lot to do with the fact that the U.S. engines have always been basically superior to anyone's anywhere else in the world. Even the Europeans, their engines are not as good as American engines, and this was basically a big military hole they had, was basically their engine production. But now I see all this crap they own: Triple H Coal, GM Global Steering, First International Oil, Freed Goldman United, Woodbine Acquisition, Bank of East Asia, USA. International Lease Corp, Aptech Laboratory Services, complete. I mean, this is. I'll put a link to this article, but it's worse than this. BBC's estimating $4 trillion. I mean, it's. I mean, they talk about TikTok, right? But I mean, that is small potato. That's part of the blue phase. Something like TikTok, not the rest of these. Now they do mention that they own stuff: Morgan Stanley, Visa. I think they put Blackstone up here, but I guess they forgot they own Blackstone up, right? Because that's what they were saying earlier in the article. Chesapeake Energy. They own a piece of Reddit. They do own Ford stock, and it's basically a Chinese person owns Ford stock. I don't think Chinese nationals should be allowed to own any American assets, period. I think Chinese nationals, Iranian nationals, any company where the country can decide to nationalize it, they should not be allowed. Those people should not be allowed to invest in the U.S. because this is screwing us. I mean, you look at Ford and you think, man, I wish I could buy stock in that and own a piece of that, and own Ford as an American. And then you realize you can't compete with when China comes in and they do $1 billion stock buy, right? Because they're just allowed to do that. Oh, it's an investor. It doesn't matter, And this is not even including stuff that's been purchased under shell corporations and shell investment firms and stuff for the CCP, or for somebody who's Chinese, or other foreign enemies, China, like Iran and stuff like that. How about the Russians? I'm sure they're doing the same thing. They just don't have as much money to play with. But look, when a lot of this crap happened, a lot of this was happening really rapidly under the Obama administration. I didn't know it was that bad. I didn't know it was this bad. I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize it was this bad. I'll put the link to this article from Investment Watch in the description, but it's beyond that. Don't use Google. Use DuckDuckGo. Search for essentially Chinese ownings. You're gonna be disturbed. And there's the last one I want to talk about is Tencent. Tencent Holdings. They're another CCP shell game, basically. They're owned and controlled by the CCP and PLA, but they're technically just an investment group. It's bullcrap. Now they get all a lot of attention because they started doing this stuff early on. They were part of the blue phase, right? The media phase. They own Riot Games outright. Period. They own large chunks in other groups. Here we go. Every game company. So I found this by PC Gamer. This is stuff as of whenever this article was. August 9th. So good on Stephen Messner for basically reporting on this close. Riot Games, 100%. Epic Games, 40%. And remember, $330 million. So if Epic Games pisses off the Chinese, they stand to lose at a minimum of $330 million. You think that kind of money, 40% of your company's ownership doesn't talk? That they don't get to influence these things? Blue Hole, they own 11.5%. I mean, these companies are selling part of their soul. Ubisoft, they own 5%. Now remember, Ubisoft is a lot larger. And just think about the amount of money the Chinese can leave on the table, right? Do you remember that whole thing about a different build going to China? And because they did all that censorship crap for Rainbow Six Siege, and then luckily the community pushed back, and now the build's separate. It's that makes a lot of sense. Silent partner can't increase voting rights. It doesn't matter. It's the money. It doesn't. This is what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, they can twist Epic Games arms, Riot Games arms, but they just all they have to do is just say, well, I guess you guys were going bankrupt, and now we're holding basically we're holding enough money for you to essentially survive. That's why Ubisoft's stock spiked, because the Chinese are the ones who bought it for an extra price, right? They said, oh yeah, we'll save you from Vivendi, right? But then the Chinese basically decide to sell off what they have. Ubi's stock price drops to almost nothing, and then they go bankrupt. Chinese have them by the balls. They don't have to say anything. Yeah, silent partner, my ass. Activision Blizzard 5%. We know they've got further influence than just simply 5% assets, right? Blizzard, man. Why? I mean, Jesus. They used to be like an American success story. Activision, Call of Duty and stuff, right? Is there a reason they're not fighting the Chinese in Call of Duty? Is there a reason? Remember freaking Modern Warfare 2, and it was like, why are the Russians parachuting in? Remember games like, this wasn't Activision, but games like Homeland, where it was supposed to be like China, and then no, they changed it last second. Instead of Homeland, it's gonna be the North Koreans. They did the same thing in the Red Dawn remake. They're like, oh, it's North Korea invading. It's like, no writer would ever suggest that, unless it's like some sort of like super future thing, and it's like, oh, this is the greater Asian colony that's coming over, like like that kind of stuff you see like in like Code Geass and stuff, where there's like like new empires and stuff like that. But in this case, like, oh yeah, that's we got to make the Chinese look okay. I believe it was the new Red Dawn. They actually filmed it all as China, and they went back and they had spent millions of dollars using CGI to change the flags and stuff from Chinese to North Korean, and then they dubbed in the lines and stuff. And it's like you see the guys in like Chinese pattern uniforms, and you're like, what the hell's going on here? That's why, I didn't go see that movie in theaters when I heard that was going on, and I might just not ever see it. I have it queued up in my streaming list, but now I'm just thinking about that. Let's see, Grind Gear Games, Path Exile, 80%. New Zealand, 80%. I mean, Jesus. Supercell, 84.3%. Platinum Games, undisclosed investment. Well, I think we know what that is. Jaeger, undisclosed. Frontier Developers, 9%. Catico, 13.5%. Paradox Entertainment, 5%. Fat Shark, 36%. Funcom, 29%. Shark Mob, 100% Shark Mob. Let's see. Studio comprised of The Division, Hitman devs, fully bought by Tencent in early 2019, though it hasn't announced its first game yet. You want to bet that this is going to be some super safe Chinese propaganda bullshit, where it's like, like, here, distract the Americans, think about other things, or diversity or something, right? Why did why was the Deus Ex, speaking of that, like, their commercials, right? Was that Square putting that out, and it was like all like Occupy and all this other stuff, and they were like, it was like all Antifa imagery and stuff, and the game really didn't have much to do with that, but they were putting that out into the culture. That's part of the blue phase. Discord has received $158 million in funding, including an undisclosed amount from Tencent. Discord. You wonder why they've been basically nuking political activists or conservative or whatever. Like Discord's got these like super crazy SJW policies. You wonder why that's happening. $158 million in funding. And that's the thing. The Chinese don't need to even own that much. They can own 5%, but what they can do with the 5% is they can purchase essentially 5% at a premium price. And then that makes the price spike. And then they know that if they basically disappear and they sell it for nothing, that the stock is going to rocket down. Right? Now, a normal person, why would you do that, right? You stand to lose money. The Chinese government doesn't stand to lose money. The Chinese investor, who's a billionaire, basically, who's being paid by basically on the CCP's take, who can just, the Chinese bank that can just say, oh yeah, please print more money for us, China, Bank of China. This would be like the Federal Reserve going around and purchasing stuff all over the place, all over the world. I mean, like, they've got all these groups by the balls. This is bad. I mean, this is so much worse than I think people realize it is. I mean, the Chinese are gearing up for war. You think that, look at this. They gear up for war, and they pull their money, or suppose we seize the investments because we have to. We're funding them. We are Riot Games. They were directly funding, basically, the Chinese government who's putting these people in concentration camps. I mean, no wonder, like, when somebody who's like a e-gamer or whatever comes out and then says something that's like pro Hong Kong or something, and then all of a sudden they get nuked from orbit. It's because of the amount of money at stake. It doesn't have to do with a lot of the time the woke left or anything. They're just useful pawns. This is basically the Chinese plan. Control the media, control the purse strings, wave the biggest carrot you can. This is not how capitalism is supposed to be played. You're not supposed to spend but I guess they got their in, right? They got their in. They had blackmailed essentially Joe Biden during the Obama administration, and then all these companies were just able to purchase unbelievable shitloads of U.S. assets, what media and otherwise. I mean, look at when the majority of these purchases are going down. They went down during the Obama administration. I did not realize it was that bad. So, yeah, okay. You can call me somebody who's maybe, Chinese aren't that bad. It's just a conspiracy that's somehow tied to the Bidens. Okay, fine. But what you cannot deny is the amount of stuff that the Chinese have purchased. These companies, this is just the minimum of the companies on record who are essentially owned by the Chinese state. Investment group. Tencent, yeah, you don't become an investment group in China unless you're basically at the beck and call of the CCP. This is bad. We are teetering on. And then here's the thing. And then I see that this Hunter Biden story breaks, where there is literally evidence after evidence after evidence, and the media will not talk about it. Even Fox doesn't like to talk about it. I saw Special Report cover it, and I saw Tucker Carlson talking about it. But it's one of those things that just has started to drift into the night, despite more and more damning information and evidence coming out. We're in trouble. We are already at war with China. I think we've been at war with China since probably, I'm going to say since the first of these major purchases were made back in 2012. At minimum. Or I guess 2011, because it was before that. Or whenever it was. That's how long I think we've been at war with China. This blue, gold, yellow phase. And that's the thing. All they needed to do in the yellow phase was basically entrap somebody like Hunter Biden or the VP. Obama, he was aloof. He just basically signed things and went out and got pictures with sunglasses and stuff. He didn't run the show. Somebody like Valerie Jarrett ran the show. Biden was moving. I mean, why do you think? Why was his son going on these overseas trips and stuff? How come Biden's net worth jumped from, what was it, like 500,000 or something a year or something? Because he's a senator. But okay, fine, you do invest stuff, so maybe he got wealthy that way. It's not like his salary was high, but you're an important person. People want you to invest so that you can do stuff as a senator. But then now he left the Obama administration worth like millions and millions and millions of dollars, and the IRS, they're not subpoenaing them, they're subpoenaing the Trumps. They're trying to get them on. I mean, no wonder they freaked out about the Ukrainian story, because Trump wasn't supposed to win the election in the U.S. and the other guy wasn't supposed to win the election in the Ukraine, and now those two were talking to each other. They were just basically one conversation away from figuring out that essentially both sides beforehand, administrations before that hand, had been on the take. And you look at that, and you look at what the Chinese were doing, and the Chinese money in the Ukraine, and the natural gas, and the crap going on in Syria, right? Like this is unbelievable, how connected this stuff is. I thought it was just a bunch of little stories all going one off at another. China's been here for the whole thing. This is bad. I hope that whoever's got the info, it doesn't matter whether it's salacious or illegal information because of the contents of these videos and stuff. They got to put it out in the public. They got to put it out everywhere. I mean, you remember what they did to Assange, where they accused him of what was it? It was like pedophilia or child pornography trafficking, and they never proved it, but they said they had it, and that was like the whole tactic, and that caused essentially the warrant and all this other stuff. And then I think it was the Swedes they never actually got the evidence, so they dropped the charges, and then he's being held in the UK for God knows how long. I mean, we're seeing basically this involvement in the US here, but the UK should really look into this too. This is a lot of the same people. This is, I mean, how hard would it have been if somebody like Epstein can essentially blackmail Prince Charles? What do you think the Chinese government can do? I'm going to do a search right in front of you, DuckDuckGo. I'm going to say Prince Charles in China. China news. Prince Charles also pulled plans to open up a boarding school. His complex relationship with China was not highly... he's snubbing China. Yeah, I wonder why he's pissed off. Oh, not Prince... Oh, my God. Is it Prince Charles? Who's the one... No. The creepy one. Is it Charles? Hold up. All right, let's do this right in front. Prince Andrew. Okay. Sorry, I said Charles. I meant Prince Andrew. Prince Charles is a piece of shit too, but he's a different kind of piece of shit. Message from Queen to China over coronavirus outbreak. So what's he saying? Message of sympathy from the Queen. Huh. Prince Andrew. Royal duties and style. China's ambassador to the UK. Oh. That's interesting. That's interesting. China's ambassador reveals Prince Andrew is still representing the Queen after delivering messages. I wonder why. They got no problem with him, right? There's something going on here. This is all
really thrilled for them, and I know that
I don't just stop talking. Visit Liu Zhengmong, China's ambassador to the UK. Was he at the embassy? Sincere sympathy, whatever. Mm-hmm. This is getting weird. And this is oh boy. I hope they just dump all the information this week, because this slow rolling stuff is actually causing, I think, confusion. I think they just need to put it all out there and just state the narrative as it is, what is going on, who is involved, what's on the tapes, what countries are involved. I don't care if it sounds out there. It's clear. I mean, it's part of China's entire strategy is to do this kind of stuff. I just didn't think that we would see it this quickly. I think Pelosi knows too, just judging by how she's been acting about this stuff. I mean, if they lose, they stand to. I mean, China must have the Democratic Party by the balls. They could do whatever they want to them. Especially if this was all going on during the Obama administration. Their strategic leverage against the Russians by essentially pulling our chain to maneuver us to fight them. That would explain some things. All right, I'm hoping this... I kind of hope for the sake of the entire world this is not as bad as what it seems to be. But it's not looking that way. I just hope to God there's not a war after all this. I mean, I don't know. What's the proper... We find out this is a bioweapon, and then we find out that a lot of this stuff was true, and essentially that they were blackmailing the Bidens by using basically leverage over Hunter Biden, and there was money and all this other stuff involved, and you've got people who are basically committing treason, for lack of a better word. I mean, that's the thing. You got somebody like Dianne Feinstein, who's like... her driver was a CCP agent, and it was driving for like over 10 years. CCP asset. Chinese listening post in these gardens they were building in where the hell was it in Washington D.C. Just building after building. I mean, Pompeo has been coming out exposing the fact that like a lot of these Chinese properties are essentially secret listening posts. Remember that embassy? I think it was in Austin or whatever that got raided by the police, and they took a ton of info from them, and the Chinese were trying to burn all the documents and stuff out in the courtyard. And then the cops busted in. But it was, the feds who were essentially leading it. What did they figure out over the last year? This is very strange. Also, the tone shift in what Donald Trump's been saying has been telling. I mean, he's going to be the first to get the information, whether it's from Giuliani or from essentially any kind of intelligence agency other than the FBI, because the FBI is completely compromised. His tone has shifted. I mean, he just straight up called them crime family now. He used to not do that. He used to just be like, Sleepy Joe's dumb, and and he was he was putting pressure to, so his son could make money. It's no longer about that anymore. It's now, he's saying, I mean, they're coming out, they're saying this is the most corrupt political family in history. And that is saying something when you've got some group like the Clintons. We're seeing the Democrats say insane stuff and do insane stuff and put forward insane stuff with media companies that are essentially purchased by the Chinese to perpetuate said insane stuff. And you think, like, how is this, like, how do you sleep at night? Well, if China's holding the freaking sword of Damocles over your head by having essentially unbelievable amount of dirt on, the last administration and the Democratic Party and whatnot, and suddenly it makes sense. I mean, they were trying to impeach the president back in, back in February for something Hunter Biden did, or really Joe Biden did with the quid pro quo. Man, this is getting weird. This is just getting weird. All right. Now that my asthma's kicking in, I'll end the video. But look into this yourself. Don't just take my word. Look into it yourself.